I never believed the old stories. To most of us, they were nothing more than scraps of folklore, whispers about a species that had once ruled the stars before vanishing into dust. Humanity. A name carried only in ancient archives, usually mentioned in hushed tones, almost like a warning. 40,000 years of silence had buried them so deeply that even their enemies stopped fearing them. But I, Commander Halden, was not born into a galaxy that could afford peace. My life had been war. The Syndicate owned half the sectors, the Dominion claimed the rest, and all of us caught in between were nothing more than pawns. We were soldiers who fought for scraps, breathing recycled air on crumbling stations, while the wealthy bartered planets like trinkets. And then, the ghost came back. I remember the first sighting, a distortion on long-range scanners, a vessel of unknown design that slipped out of the void like it had been waiting there, cloaked in shadows older than empires. The transmission logs trembled with static until a single phrase punched through, "Humanity returns." The crew thought it was a joke, some relic code bouncing across forgotten satellites. But the veterans, men like me, felt the chill. We knew ships, we knew war. And that vessel, it didn't belong to any fleet still breathing. It was something different, something older. When it finally entered our sector, I was stationed on Outpost Arian, a fortress carved into the bones of a dead moon. The place reeked of metal, grease, and old fear. I'd seen Dominion dreadnoughts, Syndicate war carriers, even pirate fleets. Nothing compared. This phantom ship slid in with a silence that made even the void feel loud. Its hull looked scarred, patched with alloys no one could identify, as though it had fought wars no historian remembered. The alien governors were the first to panic. The Dominion sent a diplomatic envoy, cloaked in their pompous arrogance, demanding identification. No reply. Syndicate fleets surrounded it, weapons primed. No reply. And then it spoke again, just once, broadcasting across every channel in a voice that sounded human, yet sharpened by centuries of machine resonance. This vessel carries the will of Earth. Earth. The word was like thunder, a planet erased from every star map, destroyed in the wars of extinction 40 millennia ago. The galaxy had written them off as finished, nothing but ashes scattered into black holes. And yet here it was, their ghost. Their will, their memory made flesh in steel. I couldn't look away. Every soldier in the outpost stared at that phantom ship with the same silent thought, burning in our skulls. If humanity really did survive, what the hell do they want now? The first shot wasn't fired by us. A Syndicate cruiser panicked, launching plasma torpedoes, the kind that could rip a station in half. Everyone braced for the explosion, but the Phantom didn't even move. Its hull shimmered, bent light, and the torpedoes vanished into nothing, as if swallowed whole. And then, without a sound, the ship responded. One beam of pale fire, just one. It cut the Syndicate cruiser apart like a knife through wet paper. No wreckage. No screams. Just silence. In that moment, the galaxy remembered fear. And me? I felt something else, something I couldn't explain. Not fear, not awe. It was heavier, older, like a man hearing his father's footsteps return after a lifetime of absence. We thought humanity had died. Now I wasn't so sure. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay in my bunk, the phantom vessel's image burned into my skull. 40,000 years. Why now? Why return after so long? I couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't just back to reclaim their legacy. They were here to collect a debt. And men like me, we were standing in the way. The phantom vessel didn't leave. It lingered at the edge of the Aryan system, silent, immovable, like some ancient god watching from its throne of steel. We expected it to strike again, to finish what it started with the Syndicate cruiser. But it didn't. For 3 days, it just hung there, its strange hull glimmering with faint energy patterns no scanner could decode. The whole sector held its breath, fleets hesitating, governments arguing, mercenaries sharpening their blades. That silence was worse than any barrage of gunfire. It meant intent. It meant patience. On the 4th day, it spoke. Not a broadcast this time, not words carved into static. It spoke directly to us, to Outpost Arion. My outpost. The comms officer had barely time to shout before the feed lit up across the central command hall. A figure appeared on the screen. Human, or at least it wore the skin of one. Male, tall, broad-shouldered, his features too symmetrical to be natural, like an echo of perfection sculpted by machines. His eyes? I'll never forget them. They weren't eyes, not really, just black voids with a faint crimson shimmer, the kind you see in nightmares when you close your lids too tight. "I am Custodian Prime," the figure said, voice steady as stone. "This vessel bears the last will of humanity. 40,000 years of silence ends today." No one in the room breathed, even the Dominion liaison, a reptilian dignitary too proud to ever show weakness, froze in his chair. The custodian didn't wait for a reply. Earth fell. Our people were burned from history, yet we endured, hidden, waiting, watching. This galaxy has forgotten who we were, what we carried. That ends now. All who bend knee to Earth will be spared. All who resist will be erased. The age of humanity's silence is over. The feed cut. For a moment, the command hall was nothing but the sound of our own hearts pounding in our ears. Then the shouting began. "They're extinct!" one officer barked, slamming his fist against the console. "It's a trick. Some syndicate psyop!" the Dominion liaison hissed, scales bristling. "No trick burns a warship in one stroke. You saw it. We all saw it." Admiral Reiner, the outpost commander, finally stood, his face as pale as rusted steel. He turned to me. "Halden, you're our best tactician. What do you make of this?" I swallowed hard, my throat dry as ash. What could I say? That every instinct screamed at me that this was no trick, no ploy? That this phantom ship and its void-eyed custodian weren't here for diplomacy? "They believe what they're saying," I muttered. "Or whatever that thing is, it believes it. If this really is humanity returning—" I stopped myself. The words felt dangerous, even to speak aloud. "Then the galaxy is about to bleed." The days that followed tore the sector apart. The Syndicate demanded an immediate assault, throwing their fleets forward like rabid dogs desperate to cover their shame from losing the cruiser. The Dominion hesitated, sending diplomats scurrying to every station, sniffing for advantage. Smaller factions, the ones like us, stuck between these two giants, were paralyzed, too weak to strike, too frightened to submit. But the phantom vessel didn't move. It didn't fire. It just waited. A predator testing its prey. Rumors spread faster than fire in an oxygen leak. Some claimed the ship carried 1 million human sleepers, ready to awaken and reclaim the stars. Others swore it was an AI gone rogue, a machine carrying the ghosts of Earth's dead. The most frightening rumor, the one no one said aloud, was that this was only one vessel of many. I found myself staring at the stars more often than sleeping. Soldiers like me weren't philosophers. We fought who we were told to fight. But something about this was different. Humanity wasn't just another species crawling out of its grave. They were legend. They were myth. And now they were demanding our submission. I didn't know if I feared them, or if part of me wanted to believe in them. The first real fracture came when a syndicate fleet jumped in system. 50 warships, bristling with plasma cannons and ion torpedoes. They moved in formation, circling the Phantom like wolves around a bear. "Orders are clear," Syndicate Command broadcast across all open channels. "This vessel is a threat to galactic stability. It will be dismantled. Any interference will be treated as treason." I was in the command hall when their admiral spoke those words. Reiner leaned over the table, muttering curses under his breath. Everyone knew what was coming. The Syndicate opened fire. 50 ships lit up the void in unison. Their plasma rounds blazing like suns, their torpedoes painting streaks of blue death across the black. The Phantom didn't dodge, didn't shield, didn't even twitch. Instead, its hull rippled. A wave of silver light spread across it like liquid metal breathing. Every shot that touched it dissolved. Plasma fizzled into sparks. Torpedoes disintegrated into harmless dust. And then the Phantom retaliated. Not with a barrage, not with chaos. Just a single pulse of white energy, rippling outward like a heartbeat. Every Syndicate ship froze. Their engines died. Their weapons went dark. And then, one by one, they imploded, collapsing in on themselves without sound, as though some invisible hand had crushed them like toys. 50 ships, gone in seconds. The silence that followed was unbearable. Even in the command hall, with only the cold glow of monitors and the tremble of distant metal, we felt it. The galaxy had just changed. The custodian's voice returned. Not on comms this time, in our minds. A whisper that wasn't sound at all. "Neil." I gripped the edge of the console until my knuckles went white. Around me, men and women gasped, some clutching their heads. Others fell to their knees as if forced by invisible chains. I fought it. Gods help me. I fought it with everything I had. The whisper faded. And when it did, I realized what true fear was. Not death, not pain, but the knowledge that you weren't even strong enough to resist the thought of submission. The Dominion responded the only way they knew how, by calling for an alliance. For the first time in my life, I saw their envoys bow their reptilian heads before alien leaders, begging for unity. Even the Syndicate, humiliated and burned, limped into negotiations. The galaxy was fracturing, and the Phantom was the hammer driving the wedge deeper. And us? Outpost Arian, a forgotten moon fortress at the edge of nowhere, suddenly mattered. We were the closest. We were the ones who had witnessed it all firsthand, which meant we became the battleground for every whisper, every bribe, every shadow meeting. Admiral Reiner locked himself in endless calls with Dominion officials. Officers drank themselves into stupors. Soldiers sharpened their blades knowing they'd be useless against whatever technology that Phantom ship wielded. And me? I kept watching the stars, because every time I looked at that vessel, hanging silent and still, I felt the same gnawing truth claw at my gut. It wasn't here to conquer. Conquerors take, enslave, burn. This vessel was here for something worse. It was here to judge. One night, unable to bear the tension, I walked the outer deck. The stars were sharp and cruel against the void, and the Phantom vessel loomed above them all like a sentinel. That's when I heard the voice again. "Halden." I froze. It wasn't in my head this time. It was on the comms channel of my personal suit, a frequency no one else should have had access to. Slowly, I tapped the receiver. "Who is this?" "You know who I am," the voice said. Calm, patient, the custodian. "You saw what we did. You felt what we are. You understand." I clenched my fists. "Understand what?" "That the galaxy has rotted," he said. "For 40,000 years you've squabbled like insects, forgetting the fire that once forged order from chaos. You serve cowards, thieves, parasites. Do you not hunger for something more? Something greater?" I didn't answer. because part of me did. "Stand with us, Halden," the custodian whispered. "Stand with humanity reborn, and when the cleansing is done, you will not be forgotten." The comms went silent. I stood there a long time, the phantom vessel glimmering in the void, my heart hammering like a war drum. And in that silence, I knew my choice would decide more than my own life. It might decide the fate of every world still breathing. The custodian's words gnawed at me like rust in steel. Stand with humanity reborn. I didn't sleep that night, or the one after. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that phantom vessel hanging in the void like a shadow against the stars. Every time I tried to silence my thoughts, I heard the custodian's voice whispering through the cracks of my mind. It wasn't just a message. It was a weight, a demand. And damn me, part of me wanted to obey. But a soldier doesn't make choices for himself. Not in the Aryan outpost, not under Admiral Reiner. Orders were the marrow of our bones, and disobedience was death long before the enemy ever fired. So I kept my mouth shut, my doubts buried deep, and watched as the outpost began to crack under pressure. The Dominion delegation arrived first. 6 ships, sleek and scaled like the creatures who flew them, docking at Aryan with their usual arrogance muted. They weren't here to posture. They were here to beg. I was stationed in the command hall when their envoy slithered in, a tall, crimson-scaled reptilian with a scar running down his snout. His name was Sarek, and I'd heard the rumors. Once a warlord, now a politician. He didn't waste words. "The Dominion will not face this threat alone," Sarek hissed, voice carrying like a blade dragged across stone. "You saw what it did to the Syndicate fleet. We saw too. This phantom must not be allowed to rise." Reiner leaned forward, his face cold but tired. "You want an alliance." Sarek bared his fangs. "Call it survival." The Syndicate, humiliated from their defeat, followed days later with a smaller envoy. Their fleet had been gutted, and it showed. Their ambassador was little more than a trembling bureaucrat in gilded robes, stinking of desperation. He offered bribes, trade deals, even promises of citizenship rights for soldiers like me, something the Syndicate had never given to outsiders. Everyone wanted a piece of us now, not because of who we were, but because we had the misfortune of staring the phantom in the face first. And still, the ship lingered, watching, waiting. On the 7th night after its arrival, the custodian spoke again, not to the outpost, not to the galaxy, to me. "Halden." I was alone in the barracks, sitting on my bunk, cleaning the same rifle I'd polished 100 times over. The voice slid into the comms of my private link as if it had always belonged there. "You carry doubt," it said. My hands froze. "Stay out of my head." "I am not in your head," the custodian replied calmly. "I am in your blood, in your bones. Do you not feel it? The pull of what you are?" "I'm not human," I snapped before I could stop myself. The words echoed in the empty barracks, sounding weaker than I meant them to. "You are," the custodian whispered. "All of you are. Descendants scattered, diluted, twisted by alien empires. But at your core, you are still ours, still Earth's. You feel it, don't you? The hunger for more than this cage of obedience, the rage against chains you cannot even see." I swallowed hard because he wasn't wrong. "Why me?" I asked finally. "Because you resist," the custodian said, "and the ones who resist are the ones we need." The comms went dead. I stared at my rifle for a long time, my reflection warped in the steel barrel. For the first time in years, I didn't see a soldier. I saw a man standing on a blade's edge, one misstep away from falling into something he couldn't crawl back from. 2 days later, war arrived at our doorstep. A Syndicate fleet clashed with Dominion forces just outside Aryan's orbit, their alliance talks, collapsing into the usual bloodshed. Plasma fire lit the void like a second sun, and the outpost shook with every shockwave that rippled against our shields. I was on deck when the alarms blared, watching fighters streak from hangars like hornets. Men and women ran past me, shouting, strapping on gear, their faces pale with fear. We weren't ready. We were never ready. "Halden!" Reiner barked, storming into the command hall. His face was red, sweat shining on his brow. "Get your unit out there! Defend the station perimeter!" I opened my mouth to answer, then stopped. The phantom vessel still hung in the distance, silent, untouched, watching as we tore each other apart. And then, without warning, it moved. Not fast, not aggressive, just a slow, deliberate glide through the chaos of battle. Syndicate and Dominion ships alike broke formation, panicked, scattering like insects from a shadow. The Phantom ignored them all, drifting toward Arian like it had always meant to. Reiner's voice cracked. "All guns on that ship, now!" The outpost roared alive, turrets spinning, cannons firing streams of plasma and rail slugs into the void. I knew it was useless. Everyone did. The shots vanished against its hull, swallowed like drops of rain in an ocean. The custodian's voice filled the air, not through speakers, not through comms, but through the bones of the station itself. "Halden." Everyone froze. Officers glanced at me, wide-eyed, their faces pale. The custodian hadn't said the outpost's name. It hadn't said the admiral's name. It had said mine. "Come." I felt every eye in the room burning into me. Reiner's face twisted with rage. "What the hell is this?" he spat. "What did you do?" "Nothing," I managed, my throat dry. The station shuddered. Not from the Syndicate, not from the Dominion, from the phantom vessel docking itself. I don't remember choosing to move. One moment I was in the command hall, the next I was walking the corridors, my boots echoing against steel, my pulse hammering in my ears. Soldiers shouted at me, some grabbing my arm, but I shook them off. My body felt like it wasn't mine anymore. When the docking hatch hissed open, the air grew cold. Mist rolled through the corridor, carrying the scent of metal and ozone. And then the custodian stepped through. He wasn't just an image now. He was real, towering, armored in plates of dark alloy that seemed to drink in the light. His eyes were still voids with that faint red shimmer, and when they fixed on me, I felt like a child standing before a storm. "Halden," he said. His voice wasn't sound. It was a weight pressing against my skull. "You are chosen." Reiner burst into the corridor, soldiers at his back, rifles raised. "Step away from my man," he shouted. His voice cracked on the last word. The custodian didn't even glance at him. With one gesture, every rifle bent like soft metal, barrels curling uselessly. The soldiers froze in shock. Reiner's face went white. "Chosen," I whispered. My voice sounded small. "For what?" "To remember," the custodian said. "And to lead." I should have run. I should have fought. But when he extended his hand, cold and steady, I found myself reaching out. The moment our hands touched, the world exploded, not in fire, but in memory. Images burned into my mind. Earth's cities, towering and proud, burning under alien bombardments. Soldiers in ancient armor screaming defiance as they were cut down. Ships, thousands of them, vanishing into black holes rather than surrender. And then silence. 40,000 years of silence. I fell to my knees, gasping, the weight of history crushing me. The custodian's voice thundered inside me. "You are ours, Halden. Blood of Earth, flesh of humanity. Will you kneel to parasites, or will you rise with us?" I looked up, trembling, my chest burning with something I couldn't name. Rage, grief, pride, all tangled into one. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a pawn. I felt like something more, and God's help me, I wanted it. When the vision faded, I was still on my knees, staring at the custodian. Reiner stood frozen behind him, face twisted with horror. The soldiers were pale, shaking, unsure whether to flee or fight. The custodian turned, his voice echoing through the corridor. "Choose." Reiner's jaw tightened. "Halden, get away from that thing. That's an order." But orders didn't feel heavy anymore. Not compared to the fire burning in my chest. Not compared to 40,000 years of silence screaming in my veins. For the first time in my life, I didn't answer my commander. I looked the custodian in the eyes and whispered, "I choose." The phantom vessel's lights flared, bathing the corridor in white. And in that light, I knew the galaxy had already lost. When I said the words, "I choose," it was like cutting my own leash. For years, obedience had been my armor, orders my compass. Every step I'd ever taken was measured, dictated by someone above me. But in that moment, kneeling in the pale light of the phantom vessel, something snapped. I wasn't Admiral Reiner's soldier anymore. I wasn't a pawn on the Dominion's board or a faceless gun for syndicate paymasters. I was mine. And that was the most terrifying freedom I had ever felt. The custodian's hand gripped my shoulder, heavy as stone, but steady. "Rise," he said. And when I did, the world seemed sharper, the air colder, the stars outside burning brighter. Behind him, Admiral Reiner's face twisted into a mask of fury and betrayal. His voice cracked across the corridor like a whip. "Halden, you're a soldier of this outpost. You're under my command. You'll stand down or—" The custodian turned his head, and Reiner's words died in his throat. He stumbled back a step, sweat beading on his brow. The soldiers flanking him gripped their useless rifles, unsure whether to run or beg. "Your command ends," the custodian said flatly. His voice wasn't raised, but it hit like a hammer against steel. "The age of parasites ends. Halden is no longer yours to waste." Reiner's face went red. "He's mine," he spat, veins bulging in his neck. "He's my soldier, my responsibility." I spoke before I knew I was speaking. "Not anymore." The words felt like fire rolling off my tongue. The Admiral's eyes snapped to me. Disbelief etched into every line of his face. He looked like a father watching his son spit in his face, like betrayal had gutted him deeper than any blade could. "You ungrateful bastard," he whispered. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was a bastard for turning my back on the only chain of command I'd ever known. But chains are still chains, no matter how long you've worn them. The custodian moved forward, and the soldiers parted like reeds before a storm. No one dared raise a hand, not after what they'd seen. He led me through the docking corridor and into the phantom vessel itself. The air inside was different. Crisp, cold, humming with energy I could feel through my boots. The walls weren't like any metal I'd ever seen. They seemed alive, pulsing faintly with light, veins of silver and black running in patterns too intricate to be natural. Every step I took echoed like I was walking through a cathedral built not for worship, but for war. "This is your inheritance," the custodian said, his voice carrying through the vast chamber like it belonged there. "The vessel is the memory of Earth. Every scar on its hull, every system humming in its bones, is history reborn." We passed through corridors that seemed endless, lined with doors that slid open at his approach. Behind them, I glimpsed things I didn't understand, racks of weapons that glowed with pale fire, rows of pods filled with shadows that might have been people, libraries of data etched into crystal lattices humming with energy. "This ship fought when Earth burned," the custodian continued. "It watched your ancestors die and it carried their rage across the stars. Now it waits for those worthy to wield it. I stopped, staring at one of the pods. The figure inside was humanoid, face hidden behind a mask, body encased in armor, unlike anything I'd seen. My throat tightened. Are they alive? The custodian didn't look at the pod. Not as you understand it. They are echoes, guardians waiting for the call. They will rise when Earth's blood calls them. I turned to him. Why me? His eyes, those black voids with their faint crimson shimmer, locked onto mine. Because you still feel. Because you still question. The galaxy has bred obedience into your bones, but fire still burns in your chest. That fire is what we need. His words sank into me, heavy and irresistible. For so long. I had fought other men's wars, spilled blood for flags that weren't mine, watched comrades die for causes that meant nothing. And now, here was something older, something bigger, telling me I could belong to a legacy instead of a leash. I wanted to believe him. Gods help me, I did. Back at Aryan Outpost, chaos erupted. I learned later that Reiner declared me a traitor the moment I stepped through that hatch. He screamed my name into every comm channel, painted me as a deserter, a coward, even a spy for the Phantom. Maybe he was right about the last part. But none of it mattered. The custodian didn't even dignify his rage with a response. The Phantom vessel stayed docked, its presence alone enough to silence every cannon, every threat. Still, the outpost wasn't silent. Soldiers argued in the corridors, some swearing loyalty to Reiner, others whispering about what they'd seen, the way the syndicate fleet had been erased, the way the custodian had spoken my name. Whispers grew into camps, camps into factions. I became a fracture line. My name was suddenly more than a man. It was a test. You were either with Reiner, clinging to the Dominion's chains, or you were with me, staring into the storm. And all I had done was choose. The custodian wasted no time. Within hours of my arrival, he began to show me the vessel's heart. We stood in a chamber vast as a canyon, its walls lined with colossal engines that pulsed like beating hearts. Energy arced through the air in veins of light, sparking against conduits older than any empire still standing. This is the core, he said, the vessel's soul. It remembers what the galaxy has forgotten. He gestured, and the core flared. Images filled the air, not flat projections but living memories surrounding me on all sides. I saw Earth's oceans boiling under orbital strikes, forests turned to ash, cities collapsing into rubble. I saw men and women fighting with weapons too crude to match their enemies, yet still refusing to kneel. I saw fleets of alien warships tearing the skies apart, and humanity's last vessels vanishing into wormholes, carrying their fury into exile. I staggered, my chest tight. Why show me this? Because you must understand what was lost, the custodian said, and what must be reclaimed. The images shifted. Now I saw the galaxy as it was, fractured, diseased, ruled by empires built on fear and greed. Dominion overlords enslaving entire systems, syndicate lords bleeding colonies dry. Countless smaller factions fighting for scraps while civilians starved in the shadows. This is what replaced Earth, the custodian said. This is the rot that filled the void we left. Do you call this progress? Do you call this civilization? No, I whispered. Then you see the truth, he said. The galaxy does not deserve to inherit the stars. Only humanity does, and you will help us remind them. I didn't answer. Not because I disagreed, but because part of me feared how much I did agree. When I returned to my quarters aboard the Phantom, I couldn't shake the images. Earth's fire, humanity's defiance, the rot of the galaxy. But it wasn't just history. It was a promise. That night, the custodian came to me again, not with memories, but with a weapon. It was a blade, long and curved, forged of some alloy that shimmered like liquid light. The hilt was wrapped in black metal, etched with markings I didn't recognize, but somehow understood. This belonged to a soldier of Earth, the custodian said. He fell defending a colony no one remembers, but his blade remembers him. Take it. I reached for it, and when my fingers wrapped around the hilt, a surge of energy shot through me. Not painful, electric, alive. My mind filled with flashes of the soldier's final stand, his defiance even as alien beasts tore him apart. I dropped the blade, gasping, my knees weak. The custodian's gaze never wavered. This is the legacy you carry. The weapons remember. The vessel remembers. You must remember, too. I picked it up again, slower this time. And when I held it, I didn't feel weak. I felt whole. Back on Arian, Reiner made his move. He cut all comms to the Phantom, ordered every docking hatch sealed, and declared martial law. His broadcasts painted me as the face of the enemy. Halden the traitor. Halden the chosen pawn of the Phantom. Soldiers loyal to him patrolled the corridors, dragging anyone who whispered my name in favor of the custodian into cells. But fear has a way of breeding loyalty. The more Reiner tried to stamp out doubt, the more it spread. Men and women who had once followed him blindly now began to question. Why had the Phantom not destroyed them when it easily could? Why had the custodian spared the outpost, spared us, when it could have wiped us clean? And so, in the shadows of the station, my name grew louder. Not as a traitor, as a choice. The custodian was patient. He let Reiner rage, let the station tear itself apart with whispers and fear, but I could feel his plan tightening like a noose. One night, standing with me on the observation deck of the Phantom, he spoke the words that would change everything. "Tomorrow," he said, "the galaxy will kneel." I stared at him, my stomach tight. "How?" "By truth," he said simply. "By memory." And when I saw the core flare again behind him, when I saw the vessel's lights burn brighter than the stars outside, I realized what he meant. He wasn't just going to show me the truth. He was going to show everyone. I thought I was ready. I'd seen the core. I'd felt the memories it carried, the fire, the death, the defiance. I thought I understood what the custodian meant when he said, "The galaxy will kneel." But nothing could have prepared me for what happened when the Phantom vessel finally revealed its truth. The morning of the broadcast, the air inside the ship felt heavier, as if the walls themselves were bracing for what was about to happen. I walked through the corridors, past pods glowing faintly with their silent guardians, past engines humming with ancient fury, until I reached the observation deck. The custodian was already there, standing with his hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the stars. "Today," he said without turning, "they will remember." I swallowed, my throat dry. "You're going to show them what you showed me?" He nodded. "The vessel carries memory, not as stories, not as records, as truth. They will see as you saw, they will feel as you felt. The fire, the silence, the rage, and then they will choose." "Choose?" I asked. My voice cracked on the word. "To kneel," the custodian said calmly, "or to burn." When the core ignited, the galaxy changed. It began as a pulse, a ripple of energy that spread outward faster than light. Every ship, every station, every colony touched by it froze as their systems bent to the Phantom's will. Screens flickered, comms died, lights dimmed, and then the memories poured through. I saw it again, but this time I wasn't alone. Billions of eyes across the stars saw what I saw. They saw Earth burning under alien skies. They saw humanity's cities crumble, oceans boil, forests turn to ash. They felt the terror of extinction, the despair of silence, and they felt the defiance, the last soldiers of Earth standing against impossible odds, screaming into the void even as they died. I felt it in my bones. But more than that, I felt the galaxy feel it too. Across the Dominion's core worlds, reptilian overlords staggered in their palaces, their scales pale, their claws trembling. In syndicate strongholds, crime lords and mercenaries clutched their chests, gasping at memories not their own. On backwater colonies, miners and farmers dropped their tools, falling to their knees as Earth's final cries echoed in their skulls. For 10 long minutes, the galaxy wasn't itself. It was Earth. It was humanity dying, burning, fighting. It was silence. And when the visions ended, when the phantom vessel's pulse faded, the stars felt different, quieter, heavier. The custodian's voice followed. Not through comms, not through broadcasts, but through every mind touched by the core. You have forgotten. Now you remember. You are ours. Kneel, and you will live. Resist, and you will join the silence. Then the connection broke. Back at Arion Outpost, the reaction was chaos. Soldiers screamed, some clawing at their eyes, others dropping to the floor in shock. Officers argued, shouting orders no one obeyed. Reiner himself collapsed against the command table, his face pale, sweat pouring down his temples. I wasn't there to see it, but I heard it later, how he tried to rally the men, calling the visions a trick, a weaponized hallucination. How half the outpost believed him. And the other half didn't. How my name became louder in the whispers. But I was there when Serac, the Dominion envoy, stormed into the phantom vessel demanding answers. He found me on the docking bridge, standing with the custodian. His crimson scales bristled, his eyes wild. "What sorcery is this?" he hissed. "What did you do to us?" The custodian didn't even blink. "I reminded you." "Reminded?" Serac spat. His claws scraped against the metal floor. "You poisoned us with your memories! Forced your pain into our minds like parasites." The custodian's gaze hardened. "You call truth poison because it burns your lies. You stand on bones you never buried, and you dare to call yourselves rulers." Serac's tail lashed against the deck. "We will not kneel to ghosts." "You already have," the custodian said softly. And I saw it in Serac's eyes, fear. He wanted to spit, to roar, to fight, but the memory had taken root, and no amount of rage could tear it free. The galaxy cracked that day. Reports flooded in. Entire Dominion garrisons refusing orders, syndicate captains abandoning fleets, colonies erupting into riots. Some called for resistance, swearing to unite against the Phantom. Others called for surrender, claiming humanity's return was divine will. The maps of power shifted like sand in a storm, and no one knew where they would settle. And me? I was caught in the center. The custodian treated me like a weapon being sharpened. He showed me more, archives of Earth's wars, strategies etched into the vessel's systems, weapons designed to tear apart fleets. He spoke to me of leadership, of command, of carrying Earth's fire into a galaxy that had forgotten fear. But every lesson, every word, made the weight heavier on my chest. Because I wasn't just learning history. I was becoming it. And yet, doubt never fully left me. Late at night, alone in my quarters aboard the Phantom, I thought about my comrades on Arion. Men I'd fought beside, women who'd bled with me. Reiner, even in his rage, had been a commander I once trusted. Were they really parasites, as the custodian claimed? Or were they just like me, trapped in chains they couldn't see? Every time I asked, the custodian gave the same answer. Chains must be broken no matter who wears them. The breaking came sooner than I expected. A week after the broadcast, a combined Dominion syndicate fleet jumped into the system. Hundreds of ships. More than I'd ever seen in one place. Their leaders had argued, cursed, maybe even killed each other behind closed doors. But they had united under one purpose: destroy the Phantom vessel. From Arian's command hall, Reiner's voice thundered through the comms. "All units prepare. Today we wipe this ghost from existence. Today we prove we are not slaves to dead men." I stood on the observation deck of the Phantom, blade in hand, watching their fleets spread across the stars like a net. Fighters swarmed, cannons charged, entire armies screamed for war, and the custodian didn't flinch. "This is their choice," he said quietly. "They sought truth. They chose silence, and so we give it to them." The core began to pulse again. The walls thrummed with power, the deck humming beneath my boots. Energy arced through the vessel like veins of lightning. I gripped the blade tighter, my chest burning. There has to be another way. The custodian turned to me. There is no other way. Mercy is silence prolonged. Judgment is silence fulfilled. And then the first shot fired. The fleets opened up in unison, a storm of plasma, torpedoes, and beams streaking toward us. The void blazed with light, the kind of light that should have ripped a ship apart, atom by atom. But the Phantom didn't break. It didn't even shake. The storm bent around it, swallowed into its shimmering hull like rain into the sea. And then the vessel answered. The core erupted, a wave of white fire sweeping outward in all directions. Dominion ships, syndicate warships, fighters by the thousands, everyone caught in its path, collapsed. Not burned, not destroyed, collapsed, folding inward as though crushed by the weight of their own existence. I screamed without realizing it, my voice drowned out by the silence that followed. Silence where hundreds of ships had been. Silence where thousands of lives had fought. Silence where entire fleets had once stood proud. And in that silence, the custodian's voice rang through my skull. "This is memory. This is judgment. This is humanity returned." When the light faded, only Arian remained. The fleets were gone, wiped from the stars as though they had never existed. The outpost drifted in stunned silence, its guns still, its soldiers broken. Reiner's voice crackled over comms, hoarse and raw. "Halden, what have you done?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because as I stared into the void where the fleets had been, blade heavy in my hand, I realized something that chilled me to my core. The custodian wasn't just showing the galaxy memory, he was making new ones. And now I was part of them. The void was empty. Where fleets had once glared at each other across the black, where the Dominion's war banners and Syndicate's hulking carriers had cast shadows across the stars, there was nothing now but silence. Ships gone, crews gone, armies gone, all of it erased in a single wave of white fire. I stood on the Phantom's observation deck, my blade hanging limp at my side, and tried to breathe. But the air felt too heavy, the silence too loud. I had seen men die before. I had watched friends bleed out on cold metal floors, heard screams cut short by fire and steel. But this wasn't death. This was absence. The galaxy would never be the same. Behind me, the custodian's voice carried through the chamber, calm as ever. "They chose silence, and so they were silenced." I spun, my chest burning with a fury I couldn't hold down. "They were soldiers, men and women following orders like I was. You didn't even give them a chance." "They had their chance," the custodian cut me off. His void-black eyes locked onto mine, unblinking. They saw the truth. They were given the memory. They chose defiance. "That wasn't a choice," I snapped. My voice cracked, raw. "It was fear. It was chains. You know damn well how chains work. You've told me yourself. And now you've slaughtered thousands because they couldn't see past them." The custodian stepped closer, his presence pressing against me like a weight. "You feel guilt because you still think of them as yours. Dominion, syndicate, outpost, parasites. They are not yours, Halden. You are not theirs. You are ours." I shook my head, gripping the blade tighter, fighting the tremor in my hands. Maybe I'm no one's. For the first time, the custodian tilted his head, as if weighing my words. Then, softly, he said, "If you were no one's, Halden, you would not be here. The vessel chose you. I chose you. The fire in your chest is not doubt. It is hunger, and hunger must be fed." I wanted to spit in his face. I wanted to scream until my throat tore. But the worst part was that a part of me, the part that had knelt when I chose him, knew he was right. The fire was there, burning hotter than ever, and it terrified me. Back at Arian, the outpost had split in two. Reiner's voice still thundered through the command decks, calling me a traitor, spitting curses into every comm channel he still controlled. But his authority was cracked. Half the soldiers refused to follow him anymore. The visions had dug into them. The custodian's fire had taken root. And now they looked at me with something I didn't want to see. Hope. Some whispered my name like it was already legend. Others cursed me, but still couldn't tear their eyes away. I wasn't Halden the soldier anymore. I wasn't even Halden the traitor. I was Halden the choice. And choice was dangerous. Fights broke out in the corridors. Barracks turned into brawling pits. Guards dragged men into cells for saying my name, only to be stabbed by their own comrades hours later. The station was bleeding from the inside, and Reiner's rage only made it worse. The custodian didn't lift a finger to stop it. He let the chaos fester, let the whispers grow. And every time I asked why, he gave the same answer. Chains must break themselves before fire can forge them. I started walking the station again, escorted by silent guardians from the Phantom. They weren't human. Not really. Armored echoes pulled from the pods, their movements sharp, unnatural, like puppets whose strings were pulled by memory itself. Wherever they walked, doors opened. Wherever they stood, soldiers lowered their rifles. And wherever I went, people looked at me, some with fear, some with anger, but most with something worse: expectation. One night, in the mess hall, a young soldier approached me. Barely more than a boy, his uniform torn, his face bruised from some fight. He dropped to one knee right there in front of everyone. "I saw it," he said, his voice trembling. "I saw earth burn. I felt it." "I won't fight against that. Tell me what to do, Commander." The word hit me like a punch. Commander. I wasn't his commander. I wasn't anyone's commander. But no one corrected him. No one pulled him back to his feet. They just watched me, waiting, as if the galaxy's weight had landed in my hands. I wanted to tell him to stand, to tell him I wasn't who he thought I was. But the words caught in my throat. Because part of me wanted to be exactly who he thought I was. I put a hand on his shoulder. My voice came out low, almost steady. "Stand, soldier. We'll find our way through this." The mess hall erupted in whispers, and I knew then that Reiner's grip on the station was broken beyond repair. Reiner struck back the only way he could. 2 days later, he stormed the docking corridor with what loyal men he still had, rifles blazing, shouting orders drowned out by gunfire. The custodian's guardians fell into formation around me, their armor deflecting bolts like rain, their blades cutting down men I'd once eaten beside. I'll never forget the look in Reiner's eyes as he fired at me. Not hate, not even rage, desperation. A man who had lost everything and couldn't accept it. His shot missed. The custodian stepped between us, his hand raised, and Reiner's rifle twisted apart in his grip. The Admiral staggered, gasping, his face pale with fear. "Parasite," the custodian said coldly. "Your chains are broken. You are nothing." And with a flick of his wrist, Reiner collapsed. Not burned, not cut, just gone, like his body had folded inward, swallowed by silence. The corridor went still. Soldiers dropped their weapons, eyes wide. Some fled, others knelt. I stood frozen, my chest tight, staring at the empty space where my commander had stood. The custodian turned to me. "Leadership is forged in fire. Today, you are forged." From that moment, everything changed. The custodian began calling me Commander Halden. The soldiers followed suit. Those who had once cursed my name now looked to me for orders. Aryan outpost, once Reiner's fortress, became something else entirely. Half station, half temple. Men and women painted Earth's broken circle emblem on their armor. They marched under banners they didn't fully understand. They whispered oaths in languages older than their own, words the custodian taught them, words that burned like fire when spoken aloud. And through it all, the phantom vessel hung in orbit like a shadow, its presence too immense to ignore. I tried to resist. Gods help me, I did. I told myself I wasn't their leader. That I hadn't asked for this, that I was just a soldier caught in the storm. But every time I hesitated, every time I tried to push the weight away, the custodian's voice pressed into me. "You are not caught, Halden. You are the storm." The galaxy outside Aryan fell into chaos. Some factions bent knee, swearing loyalty to Earth reborn. Others rallied, calling for war, claiming the Phantom's visions were lies. But every battle ended the same way. Silence. The Phantom didn't need fleets. It didn't need allies. It erased opposition with the same calm fury it had shown the Syndicate and Dominion. And yet whispers spread of resistance. Not fleets, not armies, something smaller, sharper, cells of men and women who claimed they could kill the custodian, who swore they could burn the Phantom from within. The custodian dismissed them as gnats, parasites struggling against the inevitable. But I remembered. I remembered being a soldier under chains, clinging to any spark of hope. And I knew hope was more dangerous than fleets. One night, alone on the observation deck, I pressed my forehead against the glass and stared into the stars. "Why me?" I whispered. The custodian appeared beside me, silent as always. "Because you choose." I clenched my fists. "And what if I choose wrong?" "There is no wrong," he said. "There is only silence or fire." His words echoed in my chest long after he left. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe I had chosen silence all along. The first strike came at night. Aryan outpost had become quieter since Reiner's death. Too quiet. The corridors no longer rang with orders barked from above. Instead, there were whispers, hurried steps in the dark, faces half hidden by doubt. Men and women drilled under my command. But their eyes still carried questions. Questions they were too afraid to ask out loud. The custodian said doubt was weakness, but I knew better. Doubt was survival. Doubt was the only thing that had kept me sane since stepping aboard his phantom vessel. That night, I was in my quarters, the blade across my lap, staring into its curved edge. It still pulsed with faint light whenever I held it, memories flickering at the edge of my vision. Faces. Screams. Earth's final soldiers making their last stand. I didn't know if the weapon remembered them or if I was losing my mind. Maybe both. The explosion rattled the walls. I was on my feet before the alarm blared. The deck shuddered, lights flickering. My comm lit up with panicked voices. "Sector 9 breached. They've planted charges. Resistance inside?" Resistance. I didn't even need to ask who. By the time I reached the command hall, smoke was pouring from the southern corridor. Dozens of soldiers were already dead, their bodies sprawled across the floor, rifles torn from their hands. And at the center of the chaos, masked figures moved with precision. Not syndicate, not dominion, something sharper, faster, the resistance. They weren't an army. They didn't need to be. They were ghosts, men and women who'd seen the custodian's fire and decided they'd rather burn than kneel. I cut through the smoke, blade in hand, shouting above the noise. "Hold the line!" My soldiers rallied, firing down the corridor, forcing the masked intruders to retreat behind cover. But they moved like they knew the station better than we did, slipping through maintenance shafts, planting charges, vanishing into shadows. One of them broke through the smoke, lunging at me with a short blade. I parried, sparks flying, and our eyes met through his cracked visor. For a moment, I saw him. Not a faceless enemy, but a man. His face was gaunt, his eyes wild with conviction. "You're not a commander," he hissed. "You're a slave." And then he was gone, dragging a grenade pin free with his teeth before hurling it down the corridor. The blast threw me against the wall, my ears ringing, my chest burning. When I staggered to my feet, the resistance had vanished, leaving only smoke, bodies, and silence. The custodian appeared in the aftermath, stepping through the haze as if the fire couldn't touch him. His eyes locked on mine, cold, unblinking. "You hesitated," he said. I wiped blood from my forehead, snarling. They were trained. They knew our weak points. Someone gave them intel. "They should have been ash," the custodian said flatly. "Instead, they walked free because you saw a man where you should have seen an insect." I clenched my fists. He was a man. They all are. "They are parasites," the custodian snapped, his voice cutting through the smoke like a blade. "They cling to rot because it is familiar. And if you cling with them, you will rot too." I wanted to scream at him, to throw the blade at his chest and watch it sink into whatever machine beast he truly was. But the words stuck in my throat, buried beneath the weight of his gaze. Instead, I whispered, "Then why do they fight? Why risk everything to resist if they're nothing but parasites?" The custodian stepped closer, his presence pressing down like gravity itself. "Because parasites do not know they are parasites. They think their chains are wings." He turned away, his voice calm again. "Find who helped them. Burn the weakness out of your command." The investigation was a knife in my hands. We searched the station, tore through records, interrogated soldiers. The custodian's guardians stalked the corridors, silent and merciless, dragging suspects from their bunks. Some never returned. Others came back broken, their eyes hollow, their loyalty carved into their flesh by fear. And through it all, whispers grew louder. "Halden the butcher, Halden the custodian's hound." I didn't order the tortures. I didn't order the vanishings. But I didn't stop them either. Because stopping them meant defying the custodian, and I knew what happened to those who defied him. I'd seen it in Reiner's eyes before he folded into silence. Still, guilt gnawed at me. Every name dragged from the list felt like a crack in my chest. Every scream echoed longer than it should have. And then the betrayal came. It was Corporal Bren. He'd fought beside me for years, long before the Phantom ever appeared. We'd bled together on syndicate front lines, patched each other's wounds in barracks that smelled of rot and oil. He wasn't the best soldier, but he was steady, loyal, until the resistance whispered in his ear. We caught him trying to smuggle explosives into the docking bay, hidden inside ration crates. The Guardians dragged him into the command hall, throwing him to his knees before me. His face was bruised, his lips split, but his eyes still burned with defiance. "Halden," he said, his voice hoarse. "You don't have to do this. You don't have to follow him." My chest tightened. "Bren, you've seen what he is," Bren spat, blood dripping from his mouth. "You've seen what he's done. You think he's saving us? He's just replacing one master with another. You're not a commander. You're a mouthpiece." The custodian loomed behind him, silent, waiting. "Say the word," he told me. "Burn the weakness." My hand tightened around the blade. Bren's eyes locked on mine, desperate. "You're still human, Halden. Don't forget that." I froze. Human? The word burned in my chest. For weeks, the custodian had called me blood of earth, flesh of humanity. But Bren's words felt different. He wasn't calling me a symbol. He wasn't calling me chosen. He was calling me a man. And for the first time, I realized how long it had been since anyone had done that. I didn't kill him. I couldn't. Instead, I whispered, "Lock him up." The custodian's gaze was fire against my skull. "Weakness." "He's my soldier," I said, my voice sharp, louder than I intended, "and I'll deal with him my way." The silence that followed was heavier than any battle. The guardians hesitated, their armored heads tilting toward the custodian. For a moment, I thought he would crush me where I stood, fold me into silence like Rhinor. But he didn't. He turned, his voice calm again. "Then prove your way works." And he walked out. I visited Bren that night. The cells on Arian were damp, cold, the kind of place that chewed on men until nothing was left. He sat against the wall, chains on his wrists, his face swollen from the guardian's grip. When he looked up at me, there was no fear in his eyes. Only pity. "You're cracking," he said softly. "I can see it. He's breaking you down piece by piece, and when there's nothing left, you'll just be another ghost inside that ship." I didn't answer. "You still have a choice, Halden," he pressed. "We all do. That's why we fight. Not because we think we can win, but because we'd rather die free than live as his tools." I clenched my fists until my nails dug into my palms. "You think I don't know that? You think I don't feel the weight every damn second?" "Then throw it off," Bren said. His voice cracked, but his eyes didn't waver. "Don't let him turn you into his weapon." I turned and walked out before I broke. But his words stayed. They stayed longer than the custodian's fire ever had. The resistance struck again 2 nights later. This time, they didn't come for corridors or supplies. They came for me. I was on the Phantom when the alarms blared, the guardians rushing to seal the docking bay. Explosions ripped through the hull, smoke pouring into the corridors. And in the chaos, masked figures lunged at me, blades flashing. I fought like a cornered animal, every strike of my blade tearing through them, sparks flying, blood staining the alien floor. But they kept coming, throwing themselves at me as if my death meant more than their lives. When the last one fell, bleeding at my feet, he whispered a single word before silence took him. "Traitor." Not to the custodian, to humanity. And that word cut deeper than any blade. After the battle, the custodian stood over the bodies, his voice calm as ever. "They will not stop," he said. "They cannot stop. You are their symbol, as much as you are mine. To them, your death is hope." He turned to me, his void black eyes burning. "Take command, Halden. Crush them. Lead Earth's fire into the stars." I stared at him, blood dripping from my blade, my chest heaving. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't afraid of the resistance. I was afraid of what I would become if I obeyed. The Phantom vessel was silent. Silent in a way that made the air feel heavier, the walls feel closer. The lights dimmed to a low pulse, as if the ship itself were holding its breath. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant, the fractured galaxy waiting for the next move. And inside, I stood alone, blade in hand, staring at the custodian. He stood at the heart of the core, the alien veins of the ship pulsing around him like a living cathedral. His armor drank the light. His void black eyes glimmered with that faint red shimmer, steady as ever. "You have seen what they are," he said. "You have seen what we were. It is time to decide." I gripped the blade tighter. My hands shook. But not from fear, from rage, from guilt. From the weight of everything I had done or let happen. "You want me to lead," I said, my voice low, "to carry your fire into the stars, to burn them all until nothing's left but you and your ghosts." The custodian tilted his head. "I want you to remember what you are. Blood of earth, flesh of humanity, fire that cannot be extinguished." I stepped forward, my boots echoing against the alien floor. "Humanity isn't fire," I snapped. "It's choice. That's what you've forgotten." For the first time, the custodian's gaze flickered. "Choice is weakness." "No," I said, my voice rising. "Choice is the only reason Earth ever mattered. You showed me the memories, custodian." I saw those soldiers fighting when they knew they'd die. That wasn't because they were machines. It wasn't because they were following orders. It was because they chose to stand. The core pulsed brighter, the air humming with power. The custodian's voice deepened, filling the chamber like thunder. "They chose defiance. They chose silence. And so silence claimed them. I will not let it claim us again." "You already have," I whispered. Behind me, the Guardians moved into position, their armored forms glowing faintly with the ship's energy. They weren't men. They weren't even soldiers. They were memories in flesh, puppets on strings. And yet, when I looked at them, I saw what I would become if I stepped any further down this path. A ghost. "Halden," the custodian said softer now. "The galaxy kneels. The Dominion fractured, the syndicate broken. Even your outpost is ready. All that remains is for you to lead. Take command. Take the blade and speak the oath, and the stars will burn for you." I thought of Bren in his cell, whispering that I was still human. I thought of the masked man in the corridor calling me a slave. I thought of Reiner's eyes just before he folded into silence. And I thought of Earth, the memory of it burning, yes, but also of its people choosing defiance even when all hope was lost. My hand trembled around the blade. "I won't be your weapon." The custodian's voice went flat. "Then you are nothing." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'm still me." The core flared. Energy rippled through the chamber, the floor trembling under my boots. The custodian's eyes blazed, his voice like steel grinding against stone. "You cannot kill me," he said. "I am humanity's memory. I am Earth's will." "Then it's time Earth learned to let go," I said. I turned the blade in my hands. Its curved edge shimmered, the markings along the hilt glowing brighter than ever. The memories surged through me. Faces, screams, fire, defiance. They weren't the custodian's memories anymore. They were mine. And I realized what the blade truly was. It wasn't a weapon. It was a key. I drove it into the core. The ship screamed, not a sound, something deeper, a vibration in the bones of the world. The veins of light running along the walls turned white hot, the air crackling with energy. The custodian staggered, his armor flickering like a dying star. "What have you done?" he roared. "Given them back their choice," I said. The core pulsed again, brighter, wilder. I felt it pouring into me. Memories, codes, systems older than empires. For a moment, I wasn't Halden. I was every soldier who had stood on Earth's soil, every man who had chosen defiance, every woman who had whispered no when yes meant survival. The custodian lunged, his hand reaching for my throat. But the blade flared, a wave of light throwing him back. His armored form cracked. fragments peeling away like ash. "You are nothing without me," he hissed. "I'm everything you forgot," I whispered. The Guardians froze. Their glowing forms flickered, their blades dropping to the floor. One by one, they fell to their knees, their armor dissolving into motes of light. For the first time, the phantom vessel felt empty. Not silent, but empty, like a tomb finally opened. The custodian collapsed, his form glitching, his voice a whisper. "They will tear you apart. Without me." "Then let them try," I said. "At least it'll be their choice." He reached out, fingers trembling, and then he was gone. Dissolved into light, into memory, into silence. The core dimmed. The hum of the ship softened. The blade in my hands cooled, its glow fading to a faint ember. And just like that, the phantom vessel was mine. Back at Arion, chaos erupted when the broadcast hit. It wasn't fire, it wasn't judgment, it was freedom. Every colony, every station, every ship touched by the phantom's pulse felt the custodian's hold break. No more whispers in their heads, no more memories forced into their skulls. For the first time since the phantom's return, the galaxy was quiet because it wanted to be. Bren was released from his cell before I even returned. Soldiers dropped their weapons, some crying, some laughing, some just sitting down where they stood. The chains were gone. When I stepped off the Phantom and onto the outpost, every eye turned to me, some with anger, some with gratitude, most with confusion. I raised my voice, steady despite the exhaustion clawing at my bones. "It's over," I said. "The custodian's gone. The Phantom's ours now, but it's not a weapon. Not anymore." A murmur spread through the crowd. Someone shouted, "Then who leads us?" I looked at them, at their faces. The same faces I'd once marched beside, fought beside, bled beside. And for the first time, I didn't see parasites or chains, I saw people. "No one," I said. "You do." Silence. Then, slowly, Bren stepped forward, his wrists still bruised from the chains. He met my eyes, searching for the man he'd known. "You're free," I told him. "All of you are. The galaxy's a mess, but it's yours again. Make of it what you will." His mouth twitched into something almost like a smile. "You really are a stubborn bastard," he muttered. "Maybe," I said. "But at least I'm free." The Phantom vessel stayed in orbit over Arion for days, its lights dimmed, its core quiet. No one dared board it but me. Inside, it felt like walking through a graveyard, pods empty, halls echoing with memories fading like smoke. I didn't know what would happen next. Maybe the Dominion would regroup and strike. Maybe the Syndicate would rise again. Maybe the galaxy would tear itself apart without the Custodian's shadow to unite it. But it wouldn't be my war anymore. I stood on the observation deck one last time, staring at the stars. For the first time, they didn't look cold. They looked open. Bren joined me, leaning against the railing. "What now?" he asked. I shrugged. "We build, we choose, we live." He smirked. "Sounds harder than war." "Yeah," I said. "It usually is." We stood there in silence, watching the galaxy stretch out before us. For 40,000 years, humanity had been silent. Now, for the first time, it wasn't fire or chains or ghosts that filled that silence, it was choice. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.